Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Carmen Yetzi Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, to which all of your institutions belong. I'm so glad to welcome you to another APSIA career webinar, this time co-sponsored by our good friends at Women in International Trade. And we'll be hearing from some amazing women, particularly our alumnae, about their careers and how you can follow them into this exciting global cutting edge, amazing, fill in your superlative here field, and you can grow up to be like them. And in particular, I want to thank Lisa Schroeter for being such a great partner and for partnering with WIIT and with us on this. And I will turn the floor over to her for introductions and to moderate the show. So Lisa, please.
Thank you so much, Carmen. And thanks to everybody for joining our conversation today. We're really excited. This is a great opportunity to kind of take a step back and really think through kind of career development. And I think particularly in the international trade space, one of my takeaways from always doing these panels is it really demonstrates the breadth of opportunity. Trade doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer or you have to work at USTR. There's a wide range of opportunities, but one thing that's always very common to that are what are the skills necessary to not only get the job, but to build a career. And that's really what we're going to talk through, and some incredible women with very personal stories of their own about how they made that happen and lessons they've learned along the way that we hope will be useful to everybody. I want to thank Carmen again for making this happen, and especially for the partnership with WIIT. For those of you who aren't familiar, Women in International Trade, WIIT, we are all part of the WIIT DC chapter. WIIT DC is a chapter of the broader global organization known as the Organization of Women in International Trade. And I'll put our websites in the chat as well, so you have those and can take a look. But they're one of the great groups. What we've always valued, particularly about the WIIT organization, is that it's voluntary. This is one of those groups that works because women, like the amazing women we have on the panel today, get involved and have ideas and really bring them to fruition, including 10 years ago, the creation of the WIIT Trust, which is our charitable arm. The role I play in WIIT now is chair of the trust. And that is the group that actually organizes our scholarship program. So as we've got a great student audience today, I do want to remind everybody that our trust scholarship program is a one-time semester-based program. What we're basically looking for are essays, papers on topics relevant to international trade, anywhere from 5 to 10 pages. Anyone who is currently a junior or a senior undergraduate or in graduate school in an American university, US-based institution, is eligible to apply. So if you haven't already checked it out, it's a great program, not only because the prize is a $1,500 one-time scholarship, but it's also, what I like is the intangibles. It's membership in WIIT, it's a mentor, and it's also a public program, a speaking panel like what we're doing today, based around your winning essay topic. We had one last week, for example, where our WIIT scholarship winner was able to moderate a panel on global health policy. So a lot of great professional creds to it too. This current semester, the deadline is midnight on November 1st. So if you haven't already taken a look, I encourage you to do that soon. And like I said, I'll put the website into the chat so you can have a click and take a look and see what you could do to still qualify for that. But as I said, this conversation is going to be about amazing women and how they've built the incredible careers that you're going to hear more about. We're going to start with Marjorie Chorlins, who is the Senior Vice President for European Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But she's also a role model for what I was describing in terms of a 35-year career that spans legislative assistant to Senator Danforth on the Hill, working as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Import at Department of Commerce, corporate roles with Motorola and Lockheed Martin, as well as trade association roles, NGO roles, the Business for Social Responsibility. After Marjorie, we'll hear from Carolina Costa. Carolina is with the RELEX Group, serving as the Head of Government Relations for Latin America, but similarly demonstrates not only a very diverse career here in the US, but a diverse career from her origins in Brazil. She's worked with McClarty Associates, a Washington-based political advisory firm, but also has had corporate roles in Walmart, trade associations, groups like the Brazilian Sugarcane Industry Association, and one of my good friends and partners working together on the executive circle for the Elliott School Institute of International Economic Policy. And not last, not least, but Nasim Fussel, who is now a partner at Holland and Knight, really demonstrates a very strong Washington career too, transitioning in her role from previously having worked in the Congress, the Chief International Trade Counsel for the US Senate Committee on Finance, major roles from the congressional side, working on massive trade negotiations like USMCA, but prior to that, being on the private sector side as well, working for auto manufacturer, great trade associations like the US Council for International Business, and even starting out at the Department of Commerce. So you're really going to hear how the evolution of a career can take place in DC, but what it takes to make that a success. Marjorie, I'll turn it to you.
Lisa, thanks so very much. And congratulations to you and the team at APSIA for organizing today's conversation. I'm really glad to be a part of it. This is one of the first times I've been using these new headphones. So if I'm speaking at a volume that is too high or too low, just let me know. Hopefully my neighbors won't let me know. Look, Lisa's given you all a bit of an overview of my career. I would say, having worked on Capitol Hill, the administration, in the private sector and also in the nonprofit sector, I would say in many respects, I have had what would be considered a rather linear path in the trade community. Having done that jump, having gotten the policy expertise on the Hill and then carried it down, if you will, down Pennsylvania Avenue to implement it, and then being sort of stakeholders on the other side of the table as policies are developed. So in many respects, I've had the good fortune of meeting a lot of really interesting people along the way and experiencing a lot of really cool stuff, sort of being present at the creation, as it were, in terms of WTO what were then GATT negotiations, US-Canada free trade agreement negotiations, the TTIP negotiations here at the Chamber, and so on. I would say in terms of the skills that have carried me along the way, there's a long list of them, but I think the most important that really have come through throughout my entire career are, first and foremost, networking. You want to be nice to everybody you meet, and you want to recognize that, especially if you're looking for a job, either in Washington or in the international trade policy community, you're going to run into a lot of people over the course of your career who will turn up in different guises. And so it's really important for you to know from the very beginning that having a robust network of people that you can turn to for advice, for both content advice, career advice, good friends along the way, people who can be policy think partners for you. First and foremost, I would say, is developing that network. That's how I ended up getting my job, my very first job at the European delegation here in Washington, but then also up on Capitol Hill. I think the other important skill that I've been able to develop over the years is one of interpretation. And that is not just because my undergraduate degree is in French, but because a big part of what I have had to do in the advocacy space is to be able to translate certain ideas that resonate in one context, but be able to translate those so that they resonate in another. So for example, I want to be able to get Congress to do X on trade policy. I have to be able to take that concept of what it is I'm looking for in X and translate that in a way that members of Congress, staff, and so on can understand it, put it in their terms, and then be able to do something with it. That translation skill is extraordinarily important, and one of the reasons why it's been so terrific for me to have a career that has found me on different sides of the trade policy making stool, because I am able to understand different points of view. Very, very important. One of the other things I would say is extraordinarily important, a hard skill, but one that will carry you no matter what you do, whether in trade or otherwise, and that is the ability to write well, and the ability to communicate in a very succinct fashion, key messages without too much verbiage, without needing to show that you know everything you know in every document that you write. And of course, things like grammar and so on, really, really important. Lisa mentioned the essays that that the trust considers. One of the things we look at when we're looking at those documents is in fact grammar and spelling and some of the basics, but they really do make a difference in terms of how you present yourself to prospective employers and to allies along the way. I would say the other thing that has served me well is my willingness to take chances, to try new things, to be willing to put myself out to do things that were not sort of in my natural ken. Making the shift from the Hill to the executive branch, I went from heavy policy to a combination of policy and regulatory work. Regulatory work was not my strong suit, but I thought, let me give it a try. Let me expand my horizons here a little bit. And I was able to do that. Then that experience was able to translate a couple of jobs later when I was in the private sector. So being open to new ideas. When I was looking for my next success after I left Lockheed Martin, I went out and tapped that network that I was talking about earlier. And when people would ask me, well, what is the kind of thing you're looking for? And I enumerated the things, well, private sector, public sector, et cetera, et cetera. The last thing on my list was to work for a trade association. 9 years later, I'm at the chamber and I'm really having the time of my life. So I'm going to stop there. Lots of other things that come up to me. The other one last thing I would say, besides travel a lot, is just to be really purposeful about following your heart. Don't leave that out of the mix here. Find a way to marry up your heart and your head as you pursue your career, and you will be happy no matter where you end up.
Marjorie, thanks so much. That's such great advice. And I have to admit, the being able to translate or interpret one really resonated with me. Working for a chemical company, I find myself doing that quite frequently, how you turn what we do into something anyone else can understand or appreciate. Key skills. Carolina?
Yes, hi. Hi, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me here today. This is just great. These discussions are always very inspiring. So, you know, Lisa talked a little bit about my background. So I'm a Brazilian national, born and raised, but been now in the United States for, I won't say for how long, give away my age, but for a while. And I studied here. I went to college in the US, and I also then later on got my master's at the Elliott School, that's a connection that Lisa and I have. So, you know, I think I will start with kind of the obvious from my perspective, the international background and how that has translated into a career skill, really, without planning on it, but it kind of, you know, happened that way. So when after studying in Michigan for my bachelor's, and I moved to DC, and I was learning, you know, what DC was all about, the policy world, the trade world, you know, I slowly sort of realized that, you know, having an international background, it was an advantage in lots of ways. You know, I could not only give insight into a different market and to a different region for a Washington, DC based audience, but the flexibility, right? That when you work, especially I think here in DC, it's such a multicultural environment. And coming from a multicultural environment, you know, that felt very familiar to me. That felt very just kind of in my comfort zone. And, you know, over time, kind of layering that with, you know, the academic skills and professional skills, I ended up, you know, really loving it the fact that my career has been international and that I've been able to leverage both personal experiences as well as professional experiences in different countries to advance whatever mission I'm trying to accomplish. So so that would be one aspect that again was a bit natural, but it needed some refining and it needed some fine tuning over the years, and I still am. I know it's kind of a lifelong journey. I would say another skill that over time I've acquired and really learned from others. I think that's one thing that when you are in a work environment, particularly a highly paced and competitive environment that is DEC, is to seek mentorship and seek advice from people that are ahead of you in a humble way, really, and in a way that shows that whatever advice that you are receiving and whatever experiences you're learning from someone that is a bit ahead and has more experience, you will turn that into action and and keep those that channel of communication open, because to Marjorie's earlier point, that is also about networking, and you just don't know where people will be, a few years from now, and perhaps that one person that you worked for, or that was a colleague that you try to kind of, have as a mentor might be in another place a few years later on, and you're going to be working together again. But on that sense, I would say that when you are working with people and trying to learn from them, is to then develop the skills to be an asset to the organization that you're at, in a sense of maybe there is a project, maybe there is an area, maybe there is an issue that no one is really looking into, but that you think is important, or that you think that there is value to it. So be that person, go for it, try to fill that vacuum either on your own or in collaboration with a colleague that may have may share a same interest. Again, this is happening actually right now with me. So, it's a reminder that these things are evolving, and you can be in the workforce for, a decade plus, and you're still kind of applying these concepts. And then finally, flexibility and knowing that your job should not be the same every day, and that's okay. And that's okay, because that's really how you evolve and you flex your muscles, and really kind of taking it a day at a time, and knowing that the curve is not linear. It kind of goes like this from a career perspective. I think I heard the bell. So that meant I should stop here, and happy to answer any questions.
Carolita, that was great. And I love that you mentioned that too, about like having the initiative to see where gaps are in an organization. I think that's one of the things, we don't necessarily think about as we're taking on a career role. Very often, whatever you've done before, you're bringing that with you, and that may be new and novel in an organization. So being able to leverage that to suggest some new ideas or fill a gap, see a space that isn't getting covered, and volunteers step up, that's such a great way of kind of getting involved, but as you said, demonstrating how much of an asset you are to the team. Nasim, how about your comments?
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks to APSIA for having us today. And I am just in so much alignment with my colleagues and their comments. One of the benefits of going last is I get to reflect on everything that came before me. But I do have to say before I dive in that there were a number of points that both Marjorie and Carolina made that I thought were excellent, and I hope you really take to heart. Communication. Marjorie, I love the interpretation one. When you said that, I thought, God, I cannot imagine the number of times I've had to do that, and there are so many different contexts in which you will find yourself doing that in a career in trade. Carolina can tell you, working with international community, you often do that. Lisa, as you mentioned, taking what might be very technical chemical regulatory language and distilling it for an audience, perhaps on the Hill or and then conversely, one thing I've encountered in my career is taking maybe some very policy fluffy language that isn't so technical, but is what's going to end up, in the papers and making all the headlines, and translating it for the business units within a company and helping them understand why this silly headline matters to me and how is it going to affect our business. Sometimes that takes a great deal of explaining, but having the communication skills that Marjorie and Carolina described earlier are really critical to that, as are the interpretation skills. When I was on the Hill, I often had to take something that might have been rather technical, an idea that we were developing for maybe legislation that was in the works, or perhaps it was an issue that we were facing with another country, or maybe an issue that a particular constituent brought to us that I then had to take to the member of Congress who had very little time and 1,000 other issues as well, and distill that effectively. Help that message, not just provide the interpretation and make it clear, but make it effective so that it is something that the member would want to act on, given the vast universe of issues that they face every day. So anyway, both wonderful points across the board that you made, and I really liked all of those. So another one I'll add to the mix, and something that I found repeatedly, a skill that I really had to sharpen throughout my career, and I encountered it right at the very beginning, was the ability to build consensus, develop a coalition, help a group find a common cause, find some alignment, and get to yes. There are a number of different ways you can describe this. Several different contexts in which it could arise throughout a career in trade. When I worked at a trade association, it was a cross-sectoral trade association. And Marjorie deals with this quite a bit at the chamber. We were a lot smaller at the US Council, but nonetheless, we had companies that spanned all different sectors of the economy. And we would have to form a single position for the association. And that is very hard when you're dealing with a number of different sectors, a number of different companies, a lot of different personalities, and it often created a very big challenge, but it was a challenge that I really enjoyed. And I think that being able to build consensus requires a lot of other skills, people skills for sure, communication skills, all of this is baked in. And then the networking even, I mean, taking the time and opportunity, to really know somebody, it not only helps you learn about how they think or what their particular views are, that you can then apply when you're in the moment, crunch time, having to quickly develop a consensus position. But you will develop a networking partner, a friend, a colleague, a mentor in the process as well. Another aspect of this is negotiation skills within consensus building, and something that I also encountered in various contexts throughout my career so far in trade. For sure, a big component of working on the Hill in trade. Not only do we work with the executive branch in negotiating trade agreements with other countries, but there's daily negotiating happening between the members of Congress, between the chambers, to once again develop, perhaps not consensus, but helping people get to yes, helping the members get to yes. Sometimes it's helping the members get to no. Whatever it may be, there is a significant element of negotiating that happens. So having those skills, which once again incorporate communicating both verbal and written at any given point throughout the process, very, very important skill that I would urge you to start working on as early as you can. Start in school, take the courses, read the books, take the opportunities, practical opportunities in real time, not about trade, but in life to practice those negotiation skills. My daughters already do that with me, and I don't think they have any idea what the word even means. But you'll find that you'll come across opportunities to practice this skill starting today. So I advise you to do that. And then let's see, if I were to, touch on one other, this is another point that was made already, but I cannot tell you how important it is to just be nice. It's really just so important. This is a small community in DC, the policy community generally, but the trade community in particular. It's a wonderful community, and just take advantage of the ability to meet a lot of interesting people. You may not agree with everybody. The politics of trade in particular have always been a little bit dicey, but befriend both sides of the aisle, learn their position, try to understand their position. You may not be voting on their position, but you just understand where they're coming from. There's a lot to learn from everyone in this town, regardless of what side they sit on any given issue. And I would highly recommend, if for no other reason, because it's just good to be nice, but also for your own education, the ability to really develop a broad view of international trade policy. So I will wrap there, because I'm sure we're going to have a robust Q&A with as many attendees as we have. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Nasim. And that was a great point about developing negotiation skills is not something you just do kind of in a classroom training, whether it's your children or just even day-to-day life. I mean, a lot of group projects in school are great ways to think about you're developing skills that are going to be useful for anything that you end up doing. I do want to transition. We want to make sure this is a very interactive conversation. And since we've got the great APSIA Zoom webinar format here, if anyone wants to come on screen and ask their question directly, we'd welcome that. Feel free. You guys all know how this works. You can do like the raise your hand thing. You can put it in chat. And I'm actually going to kick off with one of the questions that has been put in chat. And I feel like this is one that we get a lot. And the question really is about kind of academic background. In particular, this person is asking about how important like a business, finance, or economics background would be to having a career in trade. And I know we've had this in other fora come up. Is it about taking trade classes specifically, et cetera? And Marjorie, I'm going to call on you first, because you've already mentioned you were a French major. So how necessary is trade-specific or economic academic background important to building this career?
It's interesting. It's true. I have an undergraduate degree in French and a minor in economics. And then I went to SAIS here in Washington and got my master's in international relations and law. A lot of people think that it would be useful or helpful. In some cases, some people think necessary to have an advanced degree, so a master's or an MBA or something like that. And second, to have some really hard business/economic training to underpin your activities. Everybody's different, and I don't think they are necessarily mandatory. I do think that you'll have a stronger starting position in your career if you do have some of these concepts and ideas sort of under your belt. What I think is also really important, though, as you think about an advanced degree or even in your undergraduate, make sure that what you're studying is something that you really care about, something that you believe in, and that it's something that excites you. Because it turns out that whatever you study, chances are, if this is a field you're interested in getting into, you're going to find a way to do that by somehow leveraging your interests in whatever the topic is. I mean, maybe you are interested in language. Obviously, there's a lot you can do with language in an international trade position. Maybe you're interested indeed in negotiation, which is a whole practice unto itself. Again, something that you would really deploy here in the trade community. So do I think it's necessary? No. Do I think it's helpful? Sure. But I also think the other thing I think for a lot of folks is this, and I did not do this, by the way, and I'm sorry I didn't. I think it's really important to take time off between college and going for an advanced degree. I think it's really important to get yourself out into the workforce, even if it's for a series of, a couple of internships or something like that. Just to, and I don't mean to diss internships because those are some of the best training ground there is. I think that just having that real world experience, when you then go back into an academic setting, you will approach that work very differently, and that will serve you well. So whether you decide to take a year off or 5 years off or whatever it takes, I would really encourage you, if you have the ability to do it, to take some time between your academic pursuits and get some real world experience in there.
Yeah, I love that suggestion because it's such a great example of how you can really, that's the opportunity you have to test drive different careers.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been for me, and I will give GW full credit for being located so conveniently in the city where you can actually have jobs, not just internships. That was the 6 months at a law firm that taught me I wasn't going to law school.
Well, there you go.
Some, jobs they can teach you what you don't want to do too. Carolina, Nasim, anything you guys want to add to that?
No, I think Marjorie covered well. It really is about that focus and keeping focus and the open mind at the same time, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I would add, one thing I get asked all the time that I'll share is, do I need to be a lawyer to work in trade? And definitely no. In fact, I would make sure you're very certain you want to go to law school before you take that plunge. But, are there skills that are, very useful? Sure, that you learn in law school, like an opportunity to sharpen your negotiation skills, your writing skills, your communication skills. Yes, there are some really critical hard skills that you can pick up there and apply well to a career in trade. You can even focus on international policy and law throughout the course of your degree, but it's just not necessary. There are aspects of careers in trade where that is necessary. Certainly, if you want to be a trade lawyer, if you want to be a litigator, if you want to be a customs lawyer, then yes, it's necessary. But there are other ways to work in customs without being a lawyer. You can become a customs broker. You can, just go into a company. I know people who went straight from undergrad and got a job very entry level as a compliance assistant or analyst in a company and got phenomenal experience learning hands-on from experts and, large companies, how to actually move goods across borders and, the laws that you have to comply with in the process, et cetera. And some of those people went on to make decisions to study to become a customs broker. Others, decided to stay put. And my only point is that there are a lot of options and there isn't any one size fits all. But what I will say is that what makes this community work is that you have a little bit of everything. You have some people who bring the hard economics background. You have the lawyers with the regulatory experience. You have the policy people who have both studied and spent all their time working on policy and really get that space. And I have found that the most effective organizations tend to be, or teams tend to be, people that have a little piece of each of that, that it's like a little puzzle, you bring it all together and then you have a stellar team. Icing on the cake would be, the communication skills we talked about. So
great points. And it goes back to what you were saying before too, about kind of working within the team and relying on others' expertise too. I know, from my perspective, one of the great skills lawyers bring to a lot of these discussions are the analytical skills too. And I will freely admit, I rely a lot on the company's legal team to do exactly that. Please take a look at this draft and tell me where do you see liability? Because that's a great place to always start from and make sure we're in a good space. We've had another question that came in, mentioned about, as we were talking before, the idea about filling gaps, anticipating needs, kind of stepping up and taking responsibility within the team. And I think, Nasim, as you were mentioning too, with trade changing so much over the last, even within, say, the last 5 years, are there gaps in the future? Are there areas of trade policy that might become kind of the next? Do you see next generation opportunities that students should be thinking of in terms of, where can they help develop new space in the trade policy agenda?
That's a great question. There are a number of areas. Digital is a space where we've seen so much innovation, in the last 20 years, and that is just going to continue evolving. Privacy, cybersecurity, all of this sort of in the digital space is, I would say, a rapidly developing area of trade, while what we've, considered in the recent past traditional trade agreements maybe slowing down a bit, or taking a breather, at least for the time being. There's still a lot of wheels turning thinking about digital trade pacts. And so that is one area for sure I would recommend looking into if that interests you. And then, climate and environment. Again, I think this is an issue that is highly political, but also very interesting and definitely developing rapidly. I'm so sorry for that background ringing, another computer in the room. But that is a space that is definitely developing. It's been a part of trade policy, but a great deal of interest, I'd say, across the globe, not just here in the United States, in looking at this niche area of how this intersects with trade, how should trade policy incorporate environmental policy, and should it be done differently than has been done in the past? And then labor, another area similar to environment. It's been a component of trade policy. This isn't new, but I think there's a great deal of scrutiny in this space right now. Politically, a lot of interest in this space. And, I'll just tell you at USTR alone, which is just one little part of the trade community here, but a critical one, this is two areas in which both labor and environment, in which they are rapidly hiring at the moment, young people who are interested in this space, and digital as well. So
great points. And I think adding to that too, one of the other areas, kind of the functional areas as well. And I think Carolina, both you and Marjorie, you can speak to this. What is the space? We talked a lot about trade policy and looking at that from kind of an advocacy or a government affairs kind of a role. One of the emerging practices, you see a lot of focus within trade policy these days from internet business development aspects. A lot of this policy space is about helping to develop new markets, or as companies look at accessing emerging countries, very often, it's not a case where you can just take in a business project anymore. You have to have that kind of government affairs, regulatory trade policy component to really make sure you can have a successful project. So Marjorie, Carolina, you guys want to speak to that too, in terms of from a functional space? That's an area of growing practice where trade is expanding into that business development area.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it, but I'm also possibly about to sneeze, so excuse me in advance. Look, I think Nasim did a great job of identifying many of the topics that are very much front and center in the policy debates here in Washington and frankly globally, right? Around digital and environment and labor and things like that. There are a host of issues, facets of those issues and new issues around things like economic justice and social justice and issues that we haven't even thought about, right? That speak to our ability to prosper as a society and as a globe. I think the important thing to recognize, though, is that, and I think this gets to Lisa's question, yes, business development is a key part of increasingly what people who have trade experience are looking to do. The fact of the matter is, as you think about a job in trade, if you're thinking about a job in trade policy, right, it is a small community. There are lots of fun people who are in it. It is also the case that from a corporate perspective, so this is either wearing my Motorola hat or Lockheed Martin or here at the chamber, the emphasis on Washington-based policy professionals is evolving. And more of the interest in the company is being driven into the business units themselves, or maybe even into corporate headquarters. But frankly, it's much more into the business units, and increasingly, obviously, for a global company, out into the regions themselves. So, I mean, when I started back in the Stone Age in the mid 80s, down my trade policy path, trade was kind of a nascent field in a way. Trade policy was a bit of a nascent field. There were especially some really interesting women in the field, and frankly, I'm glad we continue to play such a central role. But I've also watched the evolution over these these many years, to the point where if I want to make sure I understand a company's perspective on a specific issue, my first point of contact in a company is going to be to their Washington office. That's not always my last point of contact in a company. And so being able to recognize or being able to plug yourself in and to be versatile in terms of what your skills are and in what context you might like to deploy those skills, I think is really, really important, because the world is shifting in terms of the complexity of the issues, but also in terms of the way we work and the implications that has for policymaking development or business development. So it's a shifting world, which creates lots of potential opportunities for you.
If I can just add to that, it's an excellent point from a corporate perspective. So having kind of moved from association to consulting, the consulting world, and then a multinational, but at the subsidiary in Brazil. And now I'm at a multinational. The headquarters are in London, but being an IT driven company, people are everywhere, right? And I've noticed that with regards to government relations now. So I have colleagues that are working from many different markets, and not necessarily the markets where policy is being discussed and made. And I am part of that. So I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I'm covering Latin America. And I am not, the policy discussion for the region is happening in the capitals. I am here, but I have seen now more and more of a this kind of mix and match of the kind of the corporate affairs, government affairs world moving on to where the businesses are. And that can be anywhere in the world, and a little bit of interest from businesses trying to understand what kind of the policy center is. So maybe DC or Brussels, whatever it is. And I've in my network of government relations professionals, both in the region as well as here in Washington, I am seeing more and more an interest by the government relations professional and trade professional to do a jump into the business. And that happening actually more often, because I think with the background that we have on trade policy or government relations, we bring something interesting to the business mind that they don't necessarily have. But when you make that jump, though, it's talking about really expanding your horizons, and it is something that I think about now, at a very large multinational. What is next, right? Could that be something for me to look into it and really go into the business sides and P&L and all these things, which is something that I would have not thought years ago. So again, I think it's the beauty of this career in a way, is that it allows you to evolve and kind of have many different roles over time. And then just to conclude, you don't have to be a lawyer. I don't have a law degree. I'm an economist by background. So, but I do sometimes wish I had that bit of that law background when I'm reading some of the, the policy that's coming out. But anyways, you learn it though over time. So.
Could I just add one additional point, building on what Carolina said, the fact that people are located all around the world, right? And that's increasingly the flexibility that comes with the hopefully post-pandemic world. I think it's really important to be open to traveling, and also extraordinarily important to be open to being posted somewhere other than Washington, right? I mean, I'm a policy wonk. This is where I'm happy to be. But I've also had the opportunity to travel just a ton and meet new people and learn new things. And again, expand that network. But I think if you're flexible in thinking about where you want to do your job, not just what you want to do, but where you want to do it, you'll have even more opportunities.
Marjorie, that ties in nicely to one of the next questions that came in about how to find those opportunities. I mean, we've talked a lot about these DC-based careers. And as you said, a lot of our jobs involve a lot of travel, a lot of international exposure. But if you're looking to create that opportunity, and kind of Carolina, as you've done, transitioning from Brazil up to the United States, how do you see, what advice would you give someone who's looking for opportunities to work in this space, but outside of Washington?
Network. No, seriously, I mean, I say that quasi in jest, but not really. I mean, talk to everybody you know. Even if you know them tangentially, find someone who knows them better, who can introduce you. But I have to tell you, throughout my career, it has been through that network that I've learned about new opportunities, and that I've laid the groundwork in a couple of instances for new opportunities. So I can't stress enough the need to build your network. Yes, have your core sort of kitchen cabinet of people that you talk to most frequently, but have a big network and nurture it.
Really couldn't agree with that more. That is, how a large part of I'd say my entire career evolved. It was much more in that respect than finding it. Sure, I looked at job postings and things of that nature, but when a transition occurred, it was organically through my network. And I would agree with the travel point and take risks and be open to moving into other parts of the company. Remember when I went from the trade association into a company, I was not looking to make a move. In fact, I was very happy in DC. I wanted to continue working in policy. And a mentor of mine at the time said, hey, I'm starting a group within this company, or I'm taking over a group within this company, and I want you to come. I think this will be a great learning opportunity. And I jumped on board right away and did so without even realizing that his proposition was to move to another state. And I did it. It was a huge decision, but I did it, and it was absolutely worth it. It's probably the most I have learned in the shortest period of time at any point in my career, and was well worth it. Was there sacrifice involved? Yes, but I feel like once I took that leap, I gained much more than what I might have felt I was sacrificing, which in hindsight was really nothing, So take those risks and definitely stay close to your network. I think that's simple. I feel like we should be offering more ways to do this, but you're hearing from a couple people now who can tell you that this has been effective. So I would advise it.
I see there's a question about, does networking mean LinkedIn? LinkedIn is certainly part of the puzzle. I have found my network on LinkedIn to have expanded exponentially. I'm not exactly sure how, but it has. It's not just online resources though. It's actually in person, engaging, going to coffee, having a lunch. I mean, now that you can do these things again, it's literally investing the time on the phone, just talking to people. It's extraordinarily important.
Marjorie, actually, sorry, let me ask you to build on that for a second too, because we've had other question kind of talk more generically about networking. What you're just describing, like for you as a trade professional, what would be your guidance to students looking to do that networking? Like, how do you like to be approached? What do you recommend that students should, the approach that they should take in order to build their network?
Mhm. So I think you reach out to everybody you know and you figure out who they know. And you talk to them and you ask for an introduction. I mean, I'm here to tell you that if an alumni comes from Wellesley College and knocks on my door, no matter the field she was in, I'm gonna sit down and have a conversation with that person. If Lisa calls me and says, "Hey, I've got this person who's looking around and she's really just looking to get some general advice, would you be willing to see her?" Of course I'll do that. So it really is just building on those connections that you have, and being as clever and creative and persistent. It is painful. It is painful to look for a job, unless you're just super lucky and you land in that sweet spot. It's painful. It takes time. But believe me, even as you leverage that network to find that next job, you're also building deeper relationships with people that will serve you well throughout.
Very fair. And I think maybe just to add to that too, because that came up in one of the questions about, what do students bring to the table? And you do. Students have something to offer in reaching out on this networking as well. And part of it is how we all keep grounded in the way different generations, quite frankly, are working in this space. But I think too, think about it to Marjorie's point about being creative. You participate in a WIIT session on last week was global health policy. I can guarantee out of those 3 panelists, someone said something really interesting. A note out to a speaker that says, I was at your session, I was fascinated by X topic. Would you be willing, could we have a 30-minute conversation? Could we have a coffee? People like that. It's a great hook. It's a little bit of flattery. At the same time, it's tying it into something that engages that person. And I really want to go back to what all of our speakers have said throughout their remarks too. Be nice, be kind, be flexible. If someone cancels on you after they've scheduled, that doesn't mean they don't like you. That probably means something else came up. Our calendars are a mess these days. There's far too many of these Zoom calls for everybody, right? That means be persistent, follow up, be flexible, get another date, but stay on it, make it happen, send the thank you note afterwards. That's what people remember in terms of building a relationship and then having you at the top of the list of people that they think about.
I think one other thing I would add on to that is, like I said, if when people get in touch with me, assuming I have the time, I'm more than happy to see them. The folks who come to me who end up being more successful, I find, are ones who come with an idea of the kinds of things they want to do. Not whether they necessarily want to work for a company or a trade association or nonprofit or government, but the kinds of topics that really interest them. Because frankly, you can find work in any facet of the trade policy, or frankly any policy conversation, global policy conversation today, if you have a good sense of what it is that's really important to you. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm looking for a new job, I don't really know where I want to start, my first question to them is, what do you want to do? And the ones who come and don't really have an answer to that, they're just looking for a job. I find typically they have been less successful over time. So it doesn't mean you can't pivot, that you can't change, that your interests don't evolve. Of course they will. But as you're thinking about where you want to go for that first or second big job or something like that, have a sense of what really floats your boat.
I like that the question was asked about LinkedIn too. I've been thinking, once again, agree with everything that has been said. And I would add, use LinkedIn very wisely. I think, we're all so lucky now to have LinkedIn, not just students starting out in their networking, but I even feel, I just started at a law firm for the first time in my career this past year, and it was an incredibly challenging time to enter a business where, you know, you're expected to develop business, bring in clients. And so, of course, I felt, you know, very, very grateful for LinkedIn, like many of us do in a number of different contexts. But I would say be careful with LinkedIn not to rely on it entirely as your single source of networking, or to simply blind, cold outreach people without something prepared that is more personal, that provides a more human contact. One of my mentors early on told me, and this was, you know, like a person that I used to work with, who then left the organization that I was working at, but we kept in very close contact. And we would do regular coffees. And he told me, and helped me a lot, I'm so grateful for him to this day, you know, try making a web of your networking. I'm going to connect you, not just with anybody, because he knew everybody, so he could have done that, but like 3 people who really he thought were good fits for me to talk to based on what he had learned about me. And then he told me, don't let it end there. When you go to these 3 people, know that I've thoughtfully selected these people, but I want you to ask them, are there 1 to 3 more people that you would recommend that I meet with? And then the web would grow. And there was just something so wonderful about that, just sort of human interaction, the thoughtfulness that had to go into the process, both by the mentor and the mentee. And I would just supplement, I would advise you to really supplement your LinkedIn or any social media aspects of your networking with that, because I think it's ultimately the most important part. That's where the real connections will be made and the lasting connections will be made.
Great points, as always. And I know we have our last 2 minutes to go here, so 30 seconds for each. But what's the one piece of advice when you think back to your being in this space, student breaking out into this area? What's the one piece of advice you would give your student self, knowing what you know now? Nasim, I'm going to start with you. We'll go backwards.
Oh, you know, don't be afraid of the big risks. Just take the plunge. I think it's a little repetitive with what I said earlier, but you know, you spend so much time worrying about these risks, and you know, I think if you follow your heart, connecting to another comment made earlier, you're going to be okay. Just take that risk, and you'll look back on it as a great learning opportunity that hopefully has opened other doors in your career, both personally and professionally.
Great. Carolina?
Yeah, I would say alongside, you know, keep that in mind of, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the career path is not necessarily linear. I think there is some ups and downs and some curves, and, you know, sometimes we feel like you're kind of moving in circles, but you aren't. It's everything that you're learning, and even the bad experiences or the experiences that feel that aren't, you know, fair to perhaps what you've done or what you are, you know, seeking to do. These become tools in your toolbox over time. And I think everything, you know, you have to take it all in and keep kind of the, you know, it's the horizon, and it's not kind of the long view. Without losing focus, of course, you know, without becoming complacent, you know, having the ambition and taking the steps forward, but with understanding that, you know, sometimes what you had not planned actually turns out to be a very, very, very good thing, if not at that moment, you know, later on. And you will use that experience for something that then comes your way that you weren't thinking about it, or that, you know, because we can't plan everything, right? We would all love to, but we can't. So, you know, it's having that flexibility, I think is really, really important.
Great. Marjorie.
Everything that these 2 women have just said, I absolutely associate myself with. I would say, make sure you know what motivates you. Is it money? Is it a cause? Is it a job where you have lots of time off? Have a good sense of what it is that really matters to you, because that'll help you assess whether a job is right for you. Really important to not just jump necessarily at the first job that's offered to you. It may be the perfect job, in which case jump. But make sure that you've done as much research as you possibly can, not just about the job itself, but about the organization that you're stepping into. Because you could have a job that sounds great on paper, but discover that the workplace is hugely toxic and you really don't want to step into that. So be prepared to do that hard work of research in advance, talking to people who maybe worked there or worked there. And then I would say, be prepared to do some grunt work. For better or worse, if you're starting out in your career, sometimes you have to do things that may not even start out working in a trade job. You may start out in something completely different, or doing the kinds of things at your job that you, frankly, you really don't want to do. But that's part of building up the expertise, and also a great way for you to learn how to engage with people, how to manage up, which is not something we've talked about. But I would say those are really important. And then just making sure that you have interests outside of work, hugely important. It's too easy to get sucked into a job, and suddenly time flies, and the world goes on and changes, and you just want to make sure that you're doing what really matters to you, and that you are connected to the world in more ways than just through your work.
Which is a great theme, and it really represents, I think, what you've heard throughout this whole conversation is, the trade area has a lot of different opportunities. There's a lot of ways of approaching it. There's a lot of ways that you can take it and build it, but it starts with you. It starts with what you find interesting. It starts with what you're passionate about. And it starts with the kind of skills that we've talked about that really, no matter where you take this, are going to help you be really successful. So can't thank you guys enough for joining today. Can't thank Carolina, Marjorie, and Nasim enough for your incredibly, personal, but also very practical recommendations and sharing your stories. Carmen, as always, you're the terrific partner in this space, and thanks for giving us the opportunity.
Well, thanks to all of you. This was such wonderful advice, I think, for our graduate students, for those of us who are also in the Stone Age, Marjorie, with you, and for the staff who are able to join us. I just want to say to our students, just as Marjorie and everyone has said, there are some warm relationships to capitalize on and some open doors to push on. So be sure you're in touch with your schools and your staff and your alumni offices, because there's lots of ways to enter into this space that are already paved and smoothed over for you. Thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you at future APSIA webinars. If you're interested, a recording of this session so you can revisit all of this wisdom over and over again will be available on APSIA's YouTube page as soon as I can get it up. Thanks to all of our speakers and to all of our attendees for being here. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.